Hi there, I'm Stephanie Carmody. If you're in midlife and quietly wondering what's next, you're not alone. This podcast is a space for honest conversations about starting over, finding yourself again, and creating a life that actually feels like yours. We talk about faith, healing, identity, and everything in between. Just real life and what it looks like to begin again. Welcome to Second Act Sessions. Today's conversation is an important one. It's one I wish I had when I was navigating my divorce. This is especially for the women in midlife who may be quietly questioning their marriage, wondering what their options are, or feeling overwhelmed by the thought of divorce. Divorce at 25 is different than divorce at 45 or 55. By midlife, there are retirement accounts, shared investments, possibly businesses, homes, and often years, sometimes decades, of emotional and financial history. And for many women, myself included, divorce was never part of the plan. My guest today understands both the legal and strategic realities of navigating this season. Jill Coil is a nationally recognized family law attorney, entrepreneur, founder of CoilLaw, and the author of No One Dies from Divorce. Beyond the courtroom, she's known for breaking down complex legal issues into conversations that are clear, relatable, and empowering. Jill has helped thousands of individuals, especially women, navigate divorce not from fear, but from preparation and strength. Please welcome Jill to Second Act Sessions. Jill, thank you so much for being here today. I'm actually really looking forward to this conversation. I think as I mentioned in my intro, this is a conversation I wish I had when I was navigating my divorce. So I'm really hoping, and I know that your expertise, legal advice, strategic advice is really going to help so many of my listeners today. So welcome, Jill. And like I said, let's get started.
Thank you. Well, thank you for having me.
My pleasure. My pleasure. I think one of the first questions I had are for women who are literally just contemplating divorce, thinking of divorce. What is that one piece of advice that you have for them if they're, obviously navigating either a toxic marriage or things just aren't working and they're like, where do I begin? Where do I start? What is that first step that you would recommend to any of my listeners? And also perhaps maybe it's something that you recommend to your clients. Like, what's the very first thing women should do?
I think that it's really, really important to know that knowledge is power. And a lot of times in these relationships, especially when there's a different power dynamic, there's a lot of power that one of the parties has given up. Financial power or, conflict power, decision power. And so because of that, when you get in these toxic relationships, sometimes you have women that just don't have knowledge. Or they've just given up on it because that hasn't been their role. They've, chosen, this is my role. I'm not going to, be in all aspects of the marriage. So my first advice to these women is you have to get knowledgeable. You don't have a choice. And if you don't know where your money is, the banks that your money goes to, the retirement accounts, if you don't know who your mortgage is through, you need to find that out. And right now in the marriage, before you even have to talk to an attorney, you have the right to be able to know things that implicate you or are part of you. If anything, if you're on a mortgage or you're on debt, bank accounts, it will be on your credit report. So a lot of these women don't even know. Like, go pull your own credit report, pay the money, go pull it, and you're going to get this wealth of knowledge that maybe you didn't know. So that's the first thing I would suggest. The second thing is make sure that you've looked at opening your own bank account, your own credit card. Do you have a way to support yourself if for some reason you chose to leave? And you've got to kind of be looking at that. Even if you decide not to leave, it's not unhealthy to have your own bank account. They have a little bit of your own savings in, or you have something that is yours. So I don't find that that's being deceitful. I think it's just being powerful.
Right. And protecting yourself. And I think it's interesting when you say knowledge is power. Someone, when I was walking through my divorce, kind of said the same thing. But I think your knowledge is knowledge of yourself and your own financial standings versus knowledge of how a divorce works. It's almost like you need to start within your own home, your own family, right? And figure out, what does this even look like? Where are all of our assets, right? Because I think, and to your point, especially women in midlife, it's a lot different in midlife navigating a divorce when you have so many more things. There's homes, assets, retirement, versus maybe when you're younger in like your 20s or 30s. I mean, I'm just saying that was my case in my situation. But I think that's such a great sage sound advice, that knowledge is power, and knowing exactly what you have and what you're going to be left with. And also, I think it for me, it was, what do I want, right? Like, what do I want if I am going through divorce? What is important to me? Is it the house? Is it the dog? Is it the furniture? Is it the retirement? And I think that for me, that was a great place to start. You know what I mean? And kind of going through all of that initially.
But you don't even have to overwhelm yourself if you're just contemplating, like thinking about leaving. You don't have to overwhelm yourself with knowing that stuff. You just need to know what's going on within your marriage. If you then choose to say, this is really not working, I don't feel safe here, or I don't feel comfortable, absolutely your next step should go talk to an attorney. You want somebody right in your city. You want somebody that knows locally what is going to happen if you choose to go to divorce.
So I think one of the next questions I have as we discuss this is that, where in the process should someone consult an attorney? I know you just mentioned that, but like, is there, like, I guess what I wanted to know is, should you even mention divorce to the spouse before you speak with an attorney? Like, for me and personally, like when I was married, we had a really rough patch, and I just went and met with an attorney just because I wanted to know my rights and I wanted to understand how it would all work. I didn't even tell my ex about it. And this is years before we even ended up getting divorced. But for me, like on the side, that helped just sort of knowing, A, I know who I would work with if I had to, and B, she sort of took me through the process. So I'd love to get your thoughts on that, like when to engage not only a divorce attorney, but also when to even mention divorce to your spouse.
That's a good question, because a lot of people use divorce as like a punishment tactic. Like, we should just get divorced. You're in a fight and like, oh, I want a divorce. Yeah. And it's obviously not a healthy boundary. It's not a healthy threat. And so if you're using that kind of language in your marriage, there's deeper roots and cracks that need to be resolved. But really, when you are really like thinking like, more than not, I don't like where I'm at, I don't like this marriage, I want to know what's going on, I would absolutely, just like you, I would pay the consultation, I would go meet with a lawyer. Telling your spouse, that's a decision, and only if you feel safe. So if this is just a knowledge-based consultation, I just want to know my rights, I don't think you have any reason to need to tell or explain to your spouse. I don't agree with keeping secrets. But at this juncture, I think it's very, very smart for you to find out what you need to do to protect yourself, to get, what knowledge you need to get, and where you can go if for some reason you decide. Right. But I do have a caveat for that.
Sure.
There's so many people that like waffle on the line of, should I get divorced? Should I stay? Should I get divorced? I tell people, you get 60 days. 60 days of you waffling, which means that you decide, you just don't know. 60 days, you need to make a decision, you're either in or you're out. Because as long as you're waffling, nothing's going to get better. Nobody's going to start improving. Nothing's going to happen. So once you're at 60 days, if you're still like, I don't know what to do, I don't know, make the decision. And if you're not ready to leave, you need to re-enter the marriage.
Right. Why 60 days? What's the significance of 60 days?
I think 60 days is enough time for you to get through enough period to be able to decide, like, it's not getting better, our expectations aren't changing, he's not willing to go to therapy, she's going through mental health cycle. It's just long enough to make sure you're not going through just a time, but it's not a year. I mean, some people will go 5 years on this waffle, and I'm like, why? That's why I wrote my book. Like why waste 5 years in a marriage that is inevitably going to end anyway? So I just like the 60 days. It's not stone, but it's just something to make you make a decision. You either need to go all in, and you need to go and
recommit to the marriage and make it work, etc. All in, both feet. You can't have 1 foot in, 1 foot out, and waffle, like you said, for years on end.
Yeah. And then if you're like not ready to do that, I don't feel safe. I don't love him that way. I like this
Mm-hmm.
other person over here that I'm talking to,
Mm-hmm.
then choose to leave. And then there's ways that we can talk about how to do that safely and
Okay.
for you.
Well, one question to kind of wrap this segment up on this topic is like, when does legal separation make sense versus filing directly for divorce? Like, I mean, for me, I believe we went through a mediator, which was, I definitely lucked out. Like, thankfully, I definitely was smart and I fought for myself and I knew what I wanted and I actually kind of played along with him and like in a strategic way. But I remember at one point them saying, separation wouldn't really make sense. If you're going to go through all that, you might as well just file for divorce. So I kind of would love your thoughts on, I guess, the difference between filing legal separation versus filing for a physical divorce.
Yeah. So the first thing you have to know, legal separation is different state to state. Some states
Okay.
don't even recognize it. Some states
Interesting.
require it. Like
Oh,
Pennsylvania, I think that you have to be separated, legally separated for like over a year before you can even get a divorce. So it's
got
very,
it.
very state specific.
Okay.
In Utah and in Texas, I almost always say a legal separation makes no sense.
Mm-hmm.
There is a temporary separation in Utah. There is kind of a legal separation, but it almost never makes sense for the situation that we're discussing.
Mm-hmm.
And so it doesn't mean that because you don't have a legal separation, you can't attempt just a civil separation, which means that you and your spouse decide to separate, you move to different places, or you do some kind of, expectation of we're going to, be separated for 90 days and then we're going to decide how we go.
Understood. So then I know you touched upon it briefly, talking about if women don't feel safe or there's any sort of emotional abuse. For my case, there was emotional abuse. And I feel like I was so emotionally abused that I probably wasn't as strong as I could have been, right? Had I not had dealt with that. So it was hard for me in a lot of ways emotionally. But like, what I wanted to know is, what do you suggest to women who are in an emotionally abusive relationship where they're being controlled or they're, threatening them, and controlling the purse strings and being like, well, this is what we're going to do. And we're going to do this. Cause I just know so many women are afraid. Like I was afraid for many years. I wasn't strong enough to pull the cord myself. I wasn't strong enough to make that decision because I was so fearful of being alone. Like, how am I going to navigate life financially? I was fully dependent upon him financially. So I feel like, what is your advice for women that are in that sort of situation?
And I feel like the generations have changed. Women our age are still much in that kind of, dynamic where it's very common for a woman to stay at home with the children and, husband to make the money. I think that dynamic has been changing now with the millennials. A lot more of them are dual income. Because my first advice, especially if you're young and you're getting married, is never become dependent on your spouse. And that doesn't mean that you can't choose to be a stay-at-home mom because maybe you were a teacher and that makes financial no sense for you to teach. And however, make sure you keep your teaching certificate up. Make sure you know your finances. Make sure that you keep, the ability to go back into the workforce. Because think about it this way, your husband could die tomorrow, and then what? Where would you be? So that's my first advice is like don't become financially dependent on somebody. Unfortunately, family's blood, marriages are not, and there are, and unfortunately some of them fail. So that's the thing. But if you're in that marriage and you are completely, where you don't have a lot of control, that's where you look to see if you can bring some power back, knowledge, figure things out. Get a village. Get people behind you that are going to be there. Therapy, your friends, your family, who will be willing to give you money in the time that you need it to be able to leave him. And then the last thing I would say is you go find the best attorney in town and you pay for it. You figure out how to do it. There will be people that will support you, but you find an attorney, not necessarily the most expensive, please. You go find and read those reviews of that attorney that does high conflict divorces, that understands this power dynamic and is willing to go to court and fight for you and be that backbone that you maybe, haven't had in the
Right.
marriage.
Well, actually, another question that you just made me think of is how does it work? So say if you aren't earning an income and your ex or your husband does, is he obligated to also pay for your attorney? How does that work? And how do you structure that? If you can't find the funds, like how does that work? Because I've heard a lot of people who didn't want to go through actual the courts, right, and wanted to opt for mediation, knowing that he would have been on the hook to pay for two attorneys. So, like, how do you navigate that?
Every state in the nation is going to require you to mediate. So you at least have that. Like, and we're a high conflict, high net worth firm, and we resolve 90% of our cases in mediation. So mediation is really a good direction to go, but you want to make sure that you have an advocate on your side that's going to be able to help you get a fair and reasonable deal. Regarding attorney fees, unfortunately, it's different in every state. And Utah is not a heavily handed attorney fee state. It's very, very hard to go into court at pre-litigation, meaning at the beginning of a case, and say, I need $40,000 for my divorce. Usually it's just going to come out of the marital split and you pay your own attorney fees. So the best advice I give to people, plan on paying for your own. And then depending on your state and what it is, then, you can talk to your attorney about what it means. But hopefully you're going to get some money out of the divorce that's going to allow you to like recoup that or pay it back. Sometimes you got to go into debt. And one of those things is go into debt for a divorce.
Do you see a lot of your clients doing that?
I think a lot of my clients have family and friends. Like I said, they have a village. Whether that's considered debt, because they want to pay them back. But a lot of my clients have a house, and eventually we're going to get it sold, and we're going to have equity in the house, and so they're going to get money. So a lot of people have assets, but they're just tied up assets. They're not liquid assets. So you look at it a different way. Maybe, I have to borrow money for the short term, but in the long run, I'll be able to pay that back.
Right, exactly. And then just how do you advise women who are afraid to file because they fear retaliation from their current husband? Like, do you see that often? And what would you suggest that they do or not do in that situation?
It is dependent, because in every state you can file a domestic violence protective order if there's been any active domestic violence. And in other states, like in Utah, you can even get it if there was just the fear of domestic violence. So every state has protections for people like that.
Okay.
That's why we have the women's shelter. You can go, if you're leaving and you're in a really abusive relationship, you can go to the women's shelter and they're going to give you all the resources to be able to get the protections. Obviously, a protective order is a piece of paper. Like,
Right.
And unfortunately now we hear all the bad, even though it's very, very rare for a spouse to retaliate and do something, that could hurt you. We hear about it. And so in the back of my mind, we're like, so I guess I say that in the fact that it's very, very rare that it happens.
Okay.
But you have to do things to protect yourself. And,
Right.
Sometimes that means going to get a legal permitted gun and making sure you know how to, work it. But
Protect yourself.
But
Right.
talk to your attorney as well. Your attorney should be able to have the steps of what they need to do to keep you safe.
In that situation, is mediation the safest, or should you, at that point, if you know it's not a safe environment, you should just opt to go right through divorce, get your own divorce lawyer, and go through the courts? Or do you always try to at least suggest mediation, no matter what state you're in? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, is there or is that just your personal, decision?
That's a very
I guess.
good question. And no, a lot of times we're not going to mediation first. Sometimes we have to file a motion for temporary orders so we can go to the court to get interim orders during the divorce. And then we'll go to mediation. So it is very strategic on what we do pursuant to whatever the case is. And if we're trying to protect, a client because they have some hostility on the other side, there are different ways that we can maneuver that. And every state is sometimes even counties are going to be different in the way you can do that. But there are some things you can do. That's why I think it's very, very important for you to meet with an attorney local to be able to know your rights or what you can do. Because It can change if you, live in Dallas and you go and meet with a Fort Worth attorney. It could
Right.
change.
Right. Well, and I'm in Connecticut. I know Connecticut is a no fault state. So it doesn't matter if someone cheated or what have you. And I guess, so I understood that. So I was like, okay, that's like good and bad, I think, in a lot of ways too. Like, because, if there is some fault, you'd be like, well, then maybe that would work in my case. But I know also, I think, doesn't character also play a role or a factor even in a no fault state, or no?
No, I keep saying depends. I sound like an attorney. It's first of all, majority of states are no fault. I think there's like maybe only 8 states left in the union that have any kind of fault. Utah being one of them. Utah is a no fault state, but it does allow fault within the statute. But what does it do? It is very, very rare that we are able to use fault to be able to somehow like slam the hammer or somehow get a better result from it. You always want to allege it because maybe it could help you with a little bit more negotiation power. But at the end of the day, most people need to be okay with just getting a divorce and irreconcilable differences. Character. If you go to trial, character does matter because credibility is going to be the biggest. So if you have a spouse that's hiding money, that's being shady, that's lying on their depositions, on their financials, and your attorney is able to go take them to trial, sit them down, and show the judge that, absolutely, if they lose credibility on the stand, that's going to help you in a divorce.
I had another question because as we're speaking, I'm thinking of my friends who are going through divorce. I'm thinking about what I walk through. I just know. So I had a friend of mine who lawyered up and she had what we thought a good attorney. But throughout the process, and it was like an over a year or so process, her divorce took a while. Her lawyer was awful. And then at what point do you suggest leaving that lawyer and getting a new lawyer? After you've already invested thousands of dollars and you just feel like they're not organized, they're not pleading your case. Like, what is your advice to women who unfortunately got stuck with a horrible lawyer and isn't really fighting or advocating for them?
Yeah, unfortunately that happens because when you find a lawyer, it's like finding a spouse. Like you have to have the same goals, you have to have good communication, and a lot of times people that are coming to us, one of the reasons they're getting divorced is because they're horrible communicators. I'm a master communicator. I can communicate to you, but I also have, a caseload and a life and a family, and your emergency is not my emergency. And to be fair, everything in divorce seems like an emergency, and it rarely is. So my biggest advice is you have to have clear communication with your attorney. You need to demand an in-person meeting or a phone call. Emails are the bane of my existence, and they're getting worse because of AI.
Interesting.
People want to communicate through email because we're in a generation of, I don't want to talk to you on the phone. And so it allows people to be passive aggressive. It allows them to gaslight more. It allows them to express their feelings because AI is really good at, validating your feelings when they're not necessarily telling you the whole truth, right? And so when I get that email from my client, the first thing I do is we need to get on the phone. Because talking to them in person, they're first of all never going to be that aggressive to me on the phone, but it allows us to open those channels. So make sure if that's you and that's your situation, you need to have that in-person meeting with your attorney to be like, I just feel like you're doing this, this, and this. And I just need to know, is that right? Am I crazy? Like, we just got to get on the same page. It is expensive to change attorneys. And there are a lot of attorneys that won't take your case. My firm will not take your case if it's in the middle of it. So my advice is if you only met with one attorney and you hired that attorney, that was your first problem. You should be meeting with 3 or 4 attorneys. You should be doing your research, read the reviews, and not just the negative reviews. Because every divorce attorney is going to have negative reviews.
Of course.
Those are sometimes good, but those are just people that are never going to be happy. Look at the positive reviews. The clients that really took a minute to write your reviews. If you go on our review page, I'm proud of it because I don't ask, I don't do games. Like, our reviews are genuine. You're going to see from those who we are, what we do. And yeah, we're not going to shy from who we are. We are different in the way, but that's really important. Just do your research. And if it's not working out in the beginning and you're having these, like, talk to your attorney. And if you want to get out, go find another attorney fast.
All right. That is really helpful to know. And again, like I said, this is the episode I wish I had and I could have shared with my friends at the time. I want to take a brief moment to mention Revelation Candle, who's supporting today's show. I'm really intentional about the brands I choose to share, and this one I personally use and genuinely love. Revelation Candle is a faith-based company, and what makes them so unique is that as the candle burns, a Bible verse is slowly revealed through the wax, which is such a beautiful and meaningful touch. They're also made with 100% clean ingredients, natural coconut soy wax, non-toxic fragrance, and they're cruelty-free. Everything is hand-poured in the USA by a small family-run business, which I personally love supporting. They offer a variety of different scents and Bible verses to choose from, so you can really select something that speaks to you or fits exactly what you're looking for. These candles make for such a thoughtful gift, whether it's for someone going through a difficult season, celebrating something special, or simply as a meaningful way to encourage someone. There's also something really calming about lighting one at the end of the day. It creates a peaceful, intentional moment. In a world that feels really busy and noisy, having something like that in your home just matters. It's one of those pieces that feel meaningful to give, but also just as special to have in your own space. If you're interested in learning more or want to try one for yourself, you can visit revelationcandle.com and use my code STEPH15 at checkout for an additional 15% off your order. Now back to today's episode. Okay, so as we were saying, we're talking about divorce lawyers and when to hire or fire. How do you navigate? I'm just saying this from experience with seeing my girlfriends walk through it. When you are dealing with a judge who is clearly not siding with you, who is, and I know they're supposed to be impartial, but like, how do you navigate that? Because my girlfriend her lawyer was an issue, but then she had this judge who just didn't give a crap about her, to be honest. Like, and it was almost as if this judge sided completely with her ex, and she really did not make out well in her divorce. And I feel so bad, but at that point, you don't really have any say or control, do you? Or is your attorney supposed to be fighting for you and obviously connecting with the judge somehow? Like, how does that work?
There's a difference of your attorney fighting for you and justice. And I'm telling you, if you're seeking justice in your divorce, you will be disappointed. There is no justice. There is no fairness. And if you want to say, that the family law judges in our country are impartial, you are mistaken. They are absolutely partial. They've been doing this for so long. A lot of them don't even care about the facts. They've heard emotional abuse and narcissism so many times that they don't care. They want to look at the facts. I'm very strategic of taking cases to trial that make sense. If you're going to trial with me, it's because I would rather have a judge give me the worst case scenario than allow an ex to give it to my client. Does that make sense? So you kind of have to have those expectations. The other thing is if the attorney didn't clearly sit your client down and set those expectations of, you understand, when we put it in front of the judge, it's out of my hands. She can advocate for her. She can zealously fight for her. And maybe she didn't feel like she heard that in court, which obviously sucks because you want your day in court. But at the end of the day, the expectations, where was that? The worst thing I get people that come to me and are like, well, my friend's divorce, happened in 2 months and she got all this alimony and I just laughed because I'm like, I could take the same case with the same set of facts, go to the exact same judge, present it the exact same way, and I could get a different result based on the fact that the judge had a hearing before of a kid being, sexually abused or something, and he's just mad and he's upset, and therefore it affects his work. So unfortunately that happens, and, for your friend. The other thing is if I was to sit down and analyze what she got, it's probably not as bad as she thinks. She just can't hear any of the positives from it because she feels like she just didn't get what she really wanted. And that's right. Hard, but a lot of times
it's a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah. And I wrote my book for her. Because at the end of the day, she's going to be fine.
Yes. Oh, yes. More than
Divorce.
fine.
Divorce is the platform to become the best version of yourself. So if you can turn it around from I got
100%.
screwed to I got an opportunity. I got an opportunity to become better, to become a better friend, to become a better human, to become a better mom. When you change your perspective, you change your trajectory. And I promise
Right.
you, you're going to be okay.
Well, and I think too, the win is you got away from your ex. Like that's the win at the end of the day. Money aside, assets, property aside, the win is you're still intact emotionally and you're still standing and you knew to get out of that relationship. And so that's what I keep telling my friends. Like the win is that you are away from that abuse. Like I was in a narcissistic relationship. Some of my friends were as well. And I'm like, the win is that you are now healthy, happy, and whole on your own. Like you can recoup the money. It's just money. You can't take it with you when you die anyways, So I'm always trying to be like on the positive side, but I'm laughing when you said, oh, there's some people that go through mediation. They're divorced in 2 months. That was me. I literally went through mediation. We were separated for a while. And at one point I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like we need to go through mediation. I need to be divorced. And so we did. And we literally were divorced within 2 months. Just like that. I got everything I wanted. He didn't want to fight for anything. Now, mind you, my ex was a lawyer. So I think he knew what would be involved if we were to truly like lawyer up each of us and litigate and everything like that. So it worked to my advantage. And again, I will say like knowledge is power. Like I knew to make sure I was very clear on what I wanted, what I wasn't going to, tolerate or accept. And so I kind of went in it with like a list of things. And that was what I kept fighting for essentially. And I didn't really have to fight that hard. So I definitely was lucky, but I know some people a year and a half, 2 years, it can get so acrimonious and intense. And obviously if there's children involved, that makes it even worse. So I just don't think, divorce is not joyful at all, but I think when you're on the other side of it, there is so much joy and happiness and peace. You know what I mean? And I'm assuming you see that with your clients, hopefully as well.
Well, and that's what a lot of people are like, no one dies from divorce, huh? They're like, I feel like dying. And I'm like,
Yes.
you do today. But I promise you the sun comes up every day. And, when you get divorced, it's like a nuclear bomb goes off. Like you have this pillar of smoke around you and you can't see, right, left, up, down. You're just in chaos. But eventually as you move through it, it starts to dissipate and you're eventually able to take one step in the, you're able to get up in the morning and get ready and you're able to find joy and, laughter. And eventually you're so far past it that you then look back and you think, oh my gosh, I can't believe how far I come. I feel so much better. And I know people like hate that. Like, just wait, just watch, just see. They hate the waiting, but I promise you it will come.
It is. And so we talked briefly about like obviously navigating divorce, separation, and midlife and like thinking about like all the different assets, retirement, pensions, everything like that. So like, I guess the question is like, what should women be thinking regarding all of those assets, retirement accounts? Like, should they come up with a list of this is what I need, this is what I want? Or does that not matter because at some point, mediation, the courts are going to try to split it 50-50? Is every state ideally when you go through divorce meant to be split 50-50 or is that?
No, it depends. I mean, equitable states like Utah, it's most likely going to be split 50-50. But Texas, where I'm licensed, is community property. And so 50-50, they probably start there.
Okay.
But because they don't have alimony or they have a very limited scope of alimony, it could be that where, the woman who stayed at home could get more percentage of the estate. So it doesn't necessarily mean that. There's a couple things that I want women to know. There are different tax consequences with a retirement, a pension, a 401k than capital gains in a house. And then there's tax consequences with alimony. Usually the guy pays alimony. So again, these are really important questions that you need to realize not one is equal to the other. Like a 401k is not equal to equity in a house. So you need to not just go into mediation thinking, well, I'll take the 401k and he takes the house and I'll be able to then just cash out the 401k and I'll be fine. You're going to get penalized on cashing out a 401k. If you're before 59 and a half, you're not even going to be able to do it. You're going to have to pull a loan on it, which means you have to pay it back, and you're going to be taxed on income tax for it. So, but a house is capital gains. You get up to like, $400,000 of tax-free money. So those are things you really need to be aware of when you're deciding like assets and what I'm going to take and how I'm going. The other thing I want women to realize is so many of them want the house. They want the house, they want the house, and then we get down to the bottom of it, they get the house, but then they're broke. They have a house.
They're house poor. Right.
They're house poor, and they don't have no access to money in the house unless they pull out a loan, like a HELOC. So as much as I get it, people want to stay in their house for their kids and stuff. Kids are adaptable. Kids can move schools. Kids are all going to be okay. And so you keeping the house doesn't need to be the necessary
thing. And then really quick regarding alimony. So like, is it true that, and again, this might vary amongst states, for alimony and determining how much alimony, is it truly based on the number of years you've been married and you get half of those years of alimony? Or is that across the board, or is that just something you can fight for?
It's very different per state. I'm only licensed in Texas and Utah, so those are the states I know really well. But I know enough now doing this that it's very, very dependent. Some states, like I believe Colorado, have like an actual like mathematical equation that they do for alimony. Utah does not. It's very subjective. And yes, in Utah you can get it up to the length of the marriage, up to the length. There's no rule that you only get half. It all depends. Florida used to have life alimony until they just recently got rid of that, meaning you could get alimony up until the day you die. So
wow, that'd be amazing.
It really was dependent.
Interesting.
Texas, you have to be married more than 10 years, I think, to even qualify for alimony, and then you maybe get 1 year per 10 years you've been married. I mean, it's...
Oh my God.
And when I started practicing in Texas 17 years ago, there was no alimony. So it's very, very dependent on where you live. And I know that frustrates a lot of people, but there's problems with alimony all across the board, whatever side you're on it. I don't think any state's found the perfect solution, but it's very dependent on where you live.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess that is
the... in Texas, like you being dependent on him is really scary, because if he decides to leave, you're not going to get alimony most likely. And so you're going to have to support yourself. Wow.
Yeah, that actually is quite frightening, in a lot of ways for so many women. I definitely think I was very fortunate. God had his hand in that for sure. I wanted to also know, obviously, because for women where faith plays a very significant role in their life, and obviously divorce is, I guess more frowned upon biblically, but there's obviously certain circumstances. So I know when I was going through divorce, I didn't want to be divorced because it was against my faith. But at some point you have to realize God does not want you being emotionally or physically abused in a marriage. And obviously there's circumstances that no one should ever be in those relationships. So obviously divorce, of course, makes the most sense. But what would you suggest to women who are struggling with that faith element personally and trying to maybe hold on or make the marriage work? I mean, I certainly did that. I did the therapy. I did everything. And at some point, lesson learned, it wasn't going to work no matter what. And it's okay to walk away, especially in the type of situation I was in. But I guess, what are your advice or thoughts for women where faith really does play such an important role in decision making about divorce?
Yeah, and I think me being from Utah, which is a highly religious state,
yes.
I have a lot of knowledge and a lot of empathy for these people, because I know that it weighs on them. But I say the same thing as you. Like, God is not a God of forcing you to stay together with an abusive POS,
Absolutely.
He is a God of love and mercy. And I tell these women, you got to give yourself a little bit of grace. One of my favorite persons ever, and one of my good friends, is Mary Crafts. She's from Utah. She's read she's written a book about this because she waited 32 years in her marriage that was very abusive to
Wow.
finally exit. And I think her story and what she talks about that is what a lot of women are going through. And she talks about life after it. And I think what it just takes is you recognizing that you're important,
Yes.
that you're worth it. God wants you to be healthy and
Yeah.
happy, and marriage will not make you happy. Marriage only elevates that, and so
Yep.
you need to be working on you and what you can do for your joy and your
Right.
future.
Very true. And now you've mentioned your book a couple times, and I did mention it in the intro, No One Dies from Divorce. I love that title. What does that mean to you? What does that title mean to you exactly?
I think the biggest thing is I just wanted people to know that they're going to be okay. Like, divorce at the moment seems insurmountable. It seems scary. It seems um the unknown, the shame. I hate that word. Like, so much shame around divorce. And I'm like, no, I hope you see it now, like how empowering it was for you. And look what you're doing now and where you've been able to come. Like, and now you're helping other women recognize that the only person that is looking on this as shameful is you. Um, and all it takes is a change of perspective, knowing that you're worthy of happiness, knowing you're worthy of love. I can't believe how many women don't find that they're worthy of love. I'm like, that makes me sad. So just working on yourself, knowing that doing a lot of us women, when we get married and then we start having children, we forget about ourselves and put everybody, it's just our maternal nature. We put our head down and we take care of everybody else. And yeah, and then when we get to our age, and our kids are older, and we look back and we think, who am I? That's okay. Like, a lot of women are like, oh, I'm so dumb for doing that. No, that's okay for you to feel that. But today can be the day you choose to decide and find out who you are, what brings you joy. And if your marriage is not going to be there when you decide to find your inner peace, your happiness, bye. Like,
Right.
you'll be okay.
You will. And I keep telling everyone that. I'm like, listen, if I can get through it, you can too. Because I was a shell of a human being after 15 and a half years with this person. I didn't know which way was up or down. And I was completely gutted and shocked by the divorce, but I also knew it had to happen. But it took me a good full year. I was in complete shock for a full year. Like, I was going through the motions, but you don't realize, like, it just rips your whole world apart, but in a good way ultimately, and you will get through it and you will survive. And I know the adage saying that time heals all wounds, and it really does a lot of time, like therapy and everything else you need to do as well. But time and distance from it, and you can really look back so much more objectively and be like, oh my God, I'm in such a better place. How did I ever tolerate that? How did I ever think so little of myself to tolerate that? Yeah. And that's when all the healing begins, and everything like that. So, and it's a journey. Don't get me wrong. I'm right now 3.5 years out from officially being divorced. And I'm a different person today than I was even a year ago, even 2-3 years ago. We're always evolving. So there is hope. So I guess one of my last questions is someone's listening, one of my listeners, they're feeling very paralyzed by fear right now. Fear of, what do I do? Should I divorce? I'm so scared. I can't be on my own. And they're either, just really struggling. What would you tell her?
Go get my book.
Start there. Start there with my book, y'all.
I know that's like shameful, but what I was going to say is my first chapter is when to save your marriage. And I go through a list of questions about what you can say to yourself about, your marriage. And then my chapter 2 is literally when to end your marriage. And it goes through all of those questions of why you should end your marriage. And I think that that's where you have to start. The second thing is, we've already talked about this, get knowledgeable.
Yes. Yep.
Figure out everything. Make sure knowledge is power. When you take power, it gives you the propensity to be able to do great things. And so that's what me and Stephanie today are saying, go get a little bit of power. Start understanding your dynamics, what is going on, so that you can then make these decisions without being so paralyzed by not knowing.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it comes down to that fear and almost feeling like frozen with fear. And I mean, I was there, and I would just say, just keep persevering, right? Like, listen to this podcast, get your book, find other podcasts, find even experts online. Like, I can't say how much healing I received by just following certain people on Instagram, whether it was about narcissistic abuse or divorce. And you can start pulling a lot of knowledge and information and helpful tips and lessons to help you navigate this stage of your life. You're not alone. There are so many resources out there nowadays. I mean, I'm Gen X. I think you're also in that same category. And we didn't have any of this at our fingertips when we were younger, So I think there is so much out there for you to look into, to get that help, and to get the resources. So I think those are really great advice, tips, and I can't thank you enough, Jill, for this conversation, because like I said, I wish I had this conversation when I was walking through my divorce. I think your book is really going to help so many people. I'll make sure all of your information is linked in the podcast here. And like I said, I've learned a lot from you, even just on your Instagram page. You're really putting out a lot of great tools and tips that are really actionable and helpful. So thank you for that. And really, just thanks again for having this conversation with me. I'm really thrilled to have had you on.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was great.
All right, everyone, thanks so much. And we'll see you next time, and God bless. Thanks so much for listening. Be sure to subscribe to Second Act Sessions on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you tune in. And if today's episode resonated with you, consider leaving a review. It helps more than you know and makes it easier for others to find these stories and start their own second act.